Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 25.6 mid-lane tier list. So if you enjoy content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were only a couple of changes this patch. We saw a direct buff towards Twisted Fate. We saw a change towards Neferi, which really benefited her in both jungle and the mid lane. We saw a buff towards Smolder, also once again helped him primarily as a ADC, but also does have an impact in the mid lane. And then we saw two nerfs towards Garen and Karma. Obviously the Garen one was targeted towards top lane, primarily his crit builds, which have very much taken over his more bruiser-centric builds, and then Karma received 10 flat damage off Q at all ranks. His hearts are everywhere. Hearts are quite a bit in mid lane and top lane. It's her main way of wave clear and harass in lane, and that is meaningful. Losing 10 damage on your core spell does do a lot to shift your power. Let's get into it. The D tier is going to consist of 3 champions. That is Smolder, who still maintains his spot here. He still underperforms as a mid laner. He still maintains a player base here, and I don't think his player base is really going to decline anymore. Obviously, when a champion gets released, they see a huge spike in pick rate. Smolder's been out for a while now. He's had a couple of different changes and iterations, but he's kind of found where I believe Riot want him to be at the moment. He underperforms as a top laner and a mid laner. He's still probably going to see some level of competitive play. Every so often he's a scaling champion with inherently good wave clear, and yeah, I'd say in solo queue he's still pretty heavily underperforms. He's still a D tier option here, but if you pick in the right matchups, you're comfortable on him, you can still get results on the champion. He still does scale to an extent, and yeah, I'd say that is the main strengths of the champion. In the case of Tristana, she also does underperform in the mid lane. She, like Smolder, received changes back along to kind of push her more away from mid to bot lane. She started really picking up as a good bot laner now. People have really realized the strength of the champion, shifted their builds around, and are performing a lot better on the pick overall. The champion's definitely a bit different compared to what it used to be. It scales a lot more aggressively now. It doesn't have quite as good wave clear, but still does have wave clear. That is still one of the strengths of the champion. No longer as level skewed, more into gold, and yeah, that was some of the changes she received to kind of push her away from the mid lane. It's been relatively successful. She now performs well in the bot lane and is a underperformant mid laner. You can still perform on the champion. I don't believe there are really bad mid laners at the moment. Maybe the core one is Mel, who really does just underperform quite heavily at the moment. She's a bit frustrating, and I believe Riot are probably going to look at changing her. She is a pretty traditional mage, and for a traditional mage to support such a low win rate combined with not a huge mastery curve, it's kind of surprising that she hasn't been buffed back up. She still maintains her spot within the D tier. I think if Luden's got buffed and she shifted over to it, it could definitely be a good way of the champion coming back into the the meta, but right now, still underperforms, still sits as a D tier option. Azir, I'm going to move up. This might surprise a lot of people, but Azir is doing a lot better at the moment. For the average player, he still underperforms. He's still a very hard to pilot champion, traditionally not as good in solo queue, but he's no doubt about it, doing it a lot better. He obviously received a couple of buffs to kind of push him back into competitive and solo queue, and buff him a bit in solo queue, and it was effective. He is doing decent. He still scales incredibly well. He is one of the best AP DPS output mages in the game, and if you enjoy that style of play, you can definitely learn him at the moment. You're probably not going to get good results until you've put 100 games into the champion, but if you're willing to sink that time and investment into him, he's a good champion just to have within your arsenal if you're ever looking to really take the game further than just playing it casually. If you're playing it casually, as it's terrible champion, so don't play Azir. Gangplank sits within the C tier. He's also a very hard to pilot champion. He's decent in both mid and top. He's just very hard. That's always going to be the prohibition of the champion. If you're comfortable playing him, you can get results. If you're not, once again, you're probably just not going to want to play the champion. Ziggs is just underperforming in the mid lane. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they end up doing some work to kind of remove the bot mid skew on Ziggs. Obviously, he's considered the #1 AP bot laner in terms of popularity and what is standard traditional. Maybe he's actually considered more of a bot laner by a lot of people than a mid laner. Whether they will fix that or change him slightly, I mean, we don't know at the moment, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of shape this champion takes long term. What another champion which could really do with Luden's being buffed, I think just a lot of mages which underperform could do with either variety or just a decent option to opt into. With Roa being buffed next patch, both these champions will suffer more because the rest of the competition, for the most part, is getting some level of buff. These two champions won't be going Roa. In the case of Jace, also just a hard pilot champion. He sits towards the high end of the C tier. He's not a bad mid laner. In fact, I think if you can play him well, he's a pretty good mid laner, but he requires a lot of mastery to really get the most out of the champion, and I recommend other AD mid laners over him in their current state. Corki, I could drop him down to the D tier. I'm going to drop him down to the D tier. This pick obviously performs a lot better in the bot lane and is very, very early game skewed. You need to get good advantages on this champion to like really make him work. He is good innate wave clear. He's also very easy to play. So there are two strengths, like big strengths for the champion. But in the mid lane and in games where they go a lot longer, he's just not a pick I really recommend at the moment. As a bot laner, I still think he's like decent. I still think he's like a B tier champion. He does scale like really well into like the elite ranks because he's just so early game skewed, but for like average play, I don't really recommend this champion. So it's more like a D tier pick in my opinion. You only really use him as like a flex option if you're maybe bot to like midfield and you kind of want to play a marksman here. Corki is an option. In the case of Brand, he's just underperforms at the moment. But he's being buffed next patch for jungle, which is unfortunate because I think he could have probably just done with some power generalistically, whilst also buffing his jungle. Brand made not a pick I'd really recommend at the moment. He's innately low elo skewed and he's just not great. So Sid's is more like a C tier option at the moment. I could probably put him towards the lower end of the C tier. In the case of Ambessa, she also isn't bad as an option. She's another top to mid flex pick, kind of like Jace. If you can pilot her well, you can get good results. I just think the champion is pretty hard to like really get like a lot of value out of. Like you want to be really good at piloting it to make it work. But if you like most champions on this list, you put like 100 games into it, you should be good to go. There are just easier, more accessible ways to climb, and if you are trying to get to master, I would recommend a lot of other things over the likes of Ambessa. In case of Aurora, she's in a bit of a weird spot. Her popularity has been declining quite a bit over time. I still think this champ's really good in Elite specifically, and like even in competitive, she still sees a decent amount of play. But for the average player, she's kind of not really there at the moment. I think Riot might need to do some follow-up work if they want to make this champion more appealing for the general audience. Because right now, yeah, she's quite aggressively Elite skewed, and it's probably not a great shape of the champion. Actually, Twisted Fate, I'm going to also leave within the C tier. He got buffed this patch. He's really close to B tier. I think Twisted Fate is a bit more of a legit option now. Also, another champion which could kind of do with Ludens being buffed. It would be nice if he could opt into it. But Roa being buffed next patch is really nice for him if he does opt into Roa first, which I believe he will probably. And I imagine that will push him back up into the B tier. But Twisted Fate, definitely benefited from, I believe it was base armor this patch. And is a very solid C tier option. He's really suffering from Yasuo being really good at the moment. Like Yasuo's really popular and really good, and Twisted Fate is a really Yasuo's a really good counter to Twisted Fate. So if Yasuo was slightly weaker, I could definitely see Twisted Fate also getting bumped back up to the beta in that kind of situation. Case of LeBlanc, she's just not been performing as amazingly at the moment. I bumped up to the beta when they did the electrocute changes. She did benefit from that, and I believe she will benefit. Actually, is she receiving any direct changes going into the VG? Actually, I don't think she is. I think LeBlanc is just going to stay the same. I think she is a C-tier option for solo queue at the moment. I think if you can pilot her really well, she's still a very good option, though, especially in Elite. So it's just a case of piloting it. If you can, if you're a casual, I imagine going into next patch, LeBlanc's win rate will tank. It will drop really significantly because a lot of new players to LeBlanc will start picking her up because of her update. Whether she might get buffed in 25.7, like on 25.8 rather, unironically because of that kind of when that shift happens. But right now, I still think she sits as like a C tier pick. I don't think she's quite there as a B tier option at the moment. And then Gragas, I'm also going to drop down. I think Gragas is fine. I think you can flex him into the mid lane. I just don't think he's quite as good as maybe a B tier option at the moment. I think Gragas in general across the board just isn't an amazing option. He's just fine. That's what I kind of describe him as. Zoe sits towards the end of the B tier. She is being, she was going to be buffed in 25.7, but then Riot took it out. out, and they're going to push it towards 25.8, something to do with the AoE on her Q no longer being reduced against minions. I think it was like trying to make her better at clearing waves, because that's one of the big frustration points of the champion, whilst trying to like balance the power around like giving a champion like Zoe wave clear. So they've pushed it back. Zoe sits as like a low B2 option at the moment. I don't think the champ's that amazing, but if you're very comfortable on it, you can still get good results. Once again, another champion which requires a decent depth of mastery. Yone sits towards the end of the B tier. He is being adjusted next patch. Yone actually isn't amazing in solo queue. I know a lot of people are really frustrated about this champion and believe that it's unwarranted, the buffs. I think the buffs are fine. They're not like overbearing. They could, I mean, Yasuo's were kind of quite aggressive. Yone obviously is also very frustrating for a lot of people. Scales really well and obviously has a lot of mobility, so I could definitely see concerns about that. He didn't need to be buffed, but I don't think it's like outrageous that he's been buffed. So Yone sits in the B tier at the moment. With the buffs, probably gets bumped up to the A tier, but it's definitely something worth watching. He's obviously losing the cleanse on his E, which can be frustrating for certain interactions and champions to deal with, so definitely worth watching that space. I don't think it's going to mean almost anything in lower MMRs, though. Most people won't use Yone E as a cleanse. It will be a very elite skewed kind of nerf. So it will just be a buff in the end. And yeah, Yone sits at the low end of the B tier at the moment. In the case of Karma, and honestly, Hui, I think both these champions probably got slightly over nerfed for lane. Well, actually, in Hui's case, probably got slightly over nerfed. In Karma's case, was really overperforming, and I think 10 damage off Q is warranted. She probably shouldn't be one of the best solo laners in the game. As a flex option. She's still a very good support, but as a solo laner now, I think she's mostly kind of relegated to like a flex option, and probably specific matchups. You can't really afford to just blind this champion now, as she did lose a substantial amount of damage on her Q, which, yeah, like I said, wave clear and her harass within lane. In Hui's case, he lost a lot of chip damage, and it was meaningful. I think Hui probably got over nerfed. It would be nicer to see some level of like pullback from that, but obviously he's not in desperate need of it. The nerfs have only left him as like a low B2 option at the moment. Another champion which could benefit from Luden's being buffed. I think there's just a lot of champions like that which could benefit from one of the weaker mage items being like buffed back up. In the case of some of the other options here, we've got the likes of Zed, another really like high skill champion. If you can pilot him well, he's doing a lot better with the E buffs. If you can't pilot him, I wouldn't recommend picking him up at the moment. He supports a high ban rate, and it's hard to consistently get him. He's also not like insanely strong, so yeah, sits more like a B2 option. Malphite, Sion are some of your tank options. I don't think they're bad, and Sion on like an island, as like a just someone who can just be on side or collect resources and kind of just be a punching bag can be quite valuable. Doesn't have as much agency as most of the other mid lane options, but if you enjoy playing tanks, he can be a good autofill pick. In the case of Malphite, you can obviously play him AP or tank. I managed to miss the one where you can get the one where you can't play him. Yeah, AP Malphite, it's fine in specific matchups. I would traditionally go tank Malphite, although tank Malphite does suffer from full mail being quite weak at the moment, but can be quite good in specific matchups. I don't think he's amazing, but he can be an option you lean into, considering he is pretty easy to play at the moment. In case of Kassadin, he's going to benefit from Aurora changes next patch. Right now, he sits as a B2 option, kind of mostly used as a counter pick. Same goes for Fizz, mostly a counter pick, kind of suffers from Luden's being quite weak. Aesol could probably be a low B2 option. I think this champion needs more. Like, Aesol shouldn't be weak for this MMR bracket. This is where Aesol should shine as a champion. I think he doesn't quite do that at the moment. He takes a bit too long to come online, and his damage isn't it's a bit underwhelming at the moment. Katarina is as good as the pilot of the champion. If you can pilot Katarina well, she is pretty decent. If you can't pilot Katarina well, she is one of the worst champions to opt into the game. You have to put time into this champion to really learn it, learn the combos, learn the rune timers, and learn how you want to like manage the wave to really get the most out of this kind of a pick. In the case of Rise, he's a solid counter pick. He can output future amounts of damage. He can be a really good lockdown option. I don't think he is one of the best mages to opt into at the moment. I don't think he's like a Sindra or an Ahri or even like an Orianna, but he's a good option and will benefit from Roa when it gets buffed in next patch. Kiana and Talon, I think, are both pretty good AD assassin options at the moment. Like, if you're comfortable on these champions, you can play them and get good results. I'd say they're a slight tier above Zed at the moment. Kiana, obviously, very, very hard to play, but doing quite well and is a decent jungle flex, kind of like actually both the other two at the moment. In the case of Talon, he's also doing decently. He got his W outgoing damage buffed more, or was it ingoing? I can't remember specifically, but he had his W buffed more recently, and that did benefit him. He sits as like a B2 option at the moment. Akshan, another champion where if you can pilot him well, is another really good AD mid option. In the case of Silas, he's kind of more of a counter pick at the moment, but he's doing better at the moment. I could probably bump him back up to the A tier. I dropped him down when he received the health growth nerf, and the meta has kind of shifted and has in fact just benefited him over time, so he could probably be bumped back up to the A tier. I'd say he sits as more like a high B tier option. Lissandra is a solid counter pick if you can find the right spots. Lissandra can be really good. Should probably also be a bit better than she currently is, though. I think a champion like Lissandra should probably be a consistent A tier option. Akali, another champion where if you can pilot it really well, it can be really good. She's a great AP assassin and another champion I'd always recommend people have within their arsenal. Especially if they do want like an accessible assassin option. And yeah, that wraps up the B tier. I'm actually going to move Silas up. I think Silas could probably deserve an A tier spot again. I think this champion isn't quite as like, it shouldn't be there with the other B tier options. Moving on from Silas, we have Nico, who is obviously more popular support. I mention it like every single mid lane patch tier list video at this point. Nico, yeah, has really lost a lot of her player base in the mid lane, and it's quite unfortunate. Don't think the champion's bad by any means. I just don't think Riot have done the right steps to kind of support it as an option here. Maybe they change that long term, maybe they don't. But right now, I'd say she sits as like a low A tier option. Could probably be considered B. That she like lingers here. If you're comfortable playing her, you can still play her, get good results. If you're not comfortable, I don't think she is a champion you should probably pick up at the moment, as she seems like, as it seems like she's kind of just not as supported here as she maybe once was. Vex is a great counter pick if you're comfortable playing Vex. She is a great anti-mobility champion. She has some really polarizing matchups and can, yeah, really be a good counter pick just to have within your pool. Another champion which could really benefit from Ludens being buffed, kind of like Nico as well. I just want them to buff this item. I don't even play mages. It's just kind of irritating. Orianna is another champion. Could benefit from Ludens being buffed. Is Seraph's rushing at the moment. It's decent though. Like, I think if you're comfortable playing Orianna, she's in a pretty solid spot. Has some really good combos with junglers. Is a very good like mage to learn laning phase with, about like weaving autos, how you manipulate the ball to like maximize damage and control spacing. I really like Orianna as a champion, and it is another pick, kind of like Akali. I would recommend just learning and just having like as something within your arsenal, because she is a very good traditional mage option. Talia, another pretty good traditional mage option, not as like mandatory as like I would say Orianna is to just have, but it is always pretty good into like specific team compositions which are relatively short range. And once you get access to like level 9, it has good wave clear and can be a really good map roaming option. How you get through the early lane pre-9 can be pretty challenging and can be one of the biggest struggles of the champion. But if you can learn it well, I think Talia is a pretty good option to have at the moment. Heimerdinger's biggest strength is the fact that he is incredibly unpopular, but is still a very good option. Can almost always get shove in lane and just be a good like turret of a champion, I guess. I think Heimerdinger is very unique in the way he works, and his unpopularity is his biggest strength. People don't understand where the damage comes from this champion and how to play against it. Quinn, very unique mid laner, but top to mid laner. Like she can work in both, and the symbiotic souls buffs combined with some of the other changes around her really benefited her this split. She's definitely doing a lot better at the moment, and is a very deserving A tier AD option. One of the ones I'd recommend going to if you have already got some level of experience playing the champion and are comfortable playing it within the mid lane. Annie has been doing progressively better over time. No direct changes to her, but the meta, I believe, has just shifted in a way which has just benefited her. Her point and click CC is always valuable. Tibbers as a summon is really strong. It can output a huge amount of damage. And just over time, she's just been doing better. I think Annie, in her current state, is probably better as a pickup champion. Like, if you can fit her into your arsenal of, like, champions and you need someone with just point and click CC, which can do a decent amount of burst damage, I think Annie is a good option now and probably a champion to pick up. Aurelia is another solid AD option. This champion has benefited from her changes towards the end of last split. She has been nerfed a couple of times, but if you're comfortable playing the champion, you should play her. If you're not comfortable playing her, I wouldn't recommend. I mean, you could learn her. Like, I don't think she's not undesirable to learn. I just think she's very hard to play, and there are other AD champions I'd recommend over her at the moment. But like sort of Pantheon and Yasuo, I think are like really on the rise mid lane options. Pantheon primarily because of his value as like a flex option and as a counter pick, and Yasuo I think is just generically the best AD option at the moment. Talking about Pantheon, he's the next one along. I've kind of already expanded on why I think Pantheon's doing a lot better at the moment, and I think it's just his counter pick value. If you can find good matchups for Pantheon, his roams, his early game damage, he can be really oppressive. He can shut down a lot of champions within the mid lane, specifically like assassins and melee options. He traditionally does a lot worse into mages, and yeah, Pantheon has just been performing a bit better over time. I think this champion deserves a spot within the A tier. Vel'Koz, Xerath, Lux are some of my artillery options within the mid lane. In the case of Vel'Koz and Lux, they are... Well, I should just go through all of them. In the case of Vel'Koz, his buffs he received not too long ago really helped him. It has solidified him as a decent mid lane option. In the case of Lux, if she has some of the best wave clear within the game, it can be really hard for certain champions to play against her. You do want to be ahead of the curve though, and there's another champion which would benefit from Ludens being buffed. Same goes for Xerath. In the case of Xerath, he is being changed next patch. He is going to be, I believe, stronger after 200 AP. And mid lane traditionally gets access to the most gold within the game. And that should be the area where Xerath benefits the most. It should be a buff in the end. Like it should be like a positive change for him. But he's going to be slightly weaker laning phase wise, and yeah, so he would probably remain as like an A tier or maybe even S tier option next patch. It would just be interesting to see where he kind of lands after those changes. In the case of Swain, he's a high A tier option. He could honestly be pushed back up to the S tier. I think in the right spot, Swain is one of the best champions within the game. He can be really unkillable and output a huge amount of damage. The changes he received not too long ago really helped him, like the ones to his passive and the AP ratio on his E kind of like cemented him as like a good mid lane option. And yeah, I'd say he's a high A tier pick at the moment. The case of Echo sits as a high A tier option. They buffed him not too long ago, and the changes towards Halo Blades and Electrocute, if you opt into those keystones, benefited him. So Echo sits as a high A tier option. Vladimir, also another really high A tier option, has another pick which has progressively been doing a lot better over time. Nerfs to other champions, buffs to champions which he is stronger into, and just shifts around in his builds have really solidified Vladimir as a really solid A tier mid lane option. Veigar, incredibly low elo skewed, but in the right spots against champions which can't really interact that well with his cage and can kind of enable him to freely scale, he can be a really good option. I think the champion struggles a lot once you go like Master or like Diamond Plus, but lower down, he's one of the best champions to kind of lean towards. Case of Kayle, she's an incredible scaling option. If you're comfortable playing Kayle, she's a really good mid laner. If you're not comfortable playing Kayle, she's not necessary to learn. I just think this is a pick which, if you're already performant on, she is in a really good spot at the moment. Garen, I'm going to drop down to the top of the A tier. He is doing worse with his nerfs. They were obviously going to directly impact his second, third, fourth item purchases. It encourages shifting over builds, but I believe crit is still the best way to go on this champion. You are still playing like your Phantom Dancers, your Mortal Reminders, your Infinity Edges, depending on what you need within the game. Victor also sits towards the high end of the A tier, another champion which received a couple of nerfs. Obviously, when he got his update, he was the most popular mid laner in the game. They directly nerfed him like 2-3 times since then, and he's kind of landed as a high A tier option. Stepping his pick in the right spots, it's very powerful. He's one of the strongest mid-game mages. He doesn't quite scale as well as some of the other options here, but yeah, once you get access to your full evolves and you're like within your 2-item kind of mid-game spike, he is incredibly powerful. That is kind of where you want to play around him, and yeah, his like strengths. Other champions here include I'm actually going to drop in it now. I'll start moving these onto the S tier. So, Malzahar, one of the easiest champions to play within the game. He trivializes a laning phase, and I think that is an incredibly valuable aspect to kind of like trivialize when you are climbing all the way up to Master. I think Malzahar is a really good option for that, and his ease of play, his point and click crowd control just makes him really valuable. His biggest weakness is obviously laning phase, like if getting access to his items, he can be really vulnerable, and champions will shove him in if he can't consistently get E2 spread on the wave. But if most people will just enable him to like freely get to his like lost chapter, his full item spikes, and that is where the champion really shines as an option. Cho'Gath still remains as an S tier pick. This champion really does, kind of akin to Malzahar, trivialize the laning phase. He has really good wave clear, combined with his full movement speed build. It gives him incredible scaling. He does a huge amount of damage just because his base kit provides it. I'd say he's better as a mid lane option than a top lane option at the moment, and yeah, his value is just incredibly high as a champion, especially when you get access to durability later on, and you act as like a champion which has huge burst, good durability, and decent health, very good health stacking through his ultimate. In the case of Anivia, champion which performs really well at the moment when you, if you already pilot, can play Anivia, she is one of the best champions to still go to. Anivia traditionally always maintains a spot within the S tier. She tends to not absorb a huge amount of ban rate, but if you can pilot the champion well, she is still an incredibly good option. The buff towards Roa next patch should be huge for her. Will she get nerfed in 25.8? It's well, I don't know, honestly. Riot might just be happy with her win rate after the Roa buffs, but obviously always something interesting to see. Probably worth learning this patch if you are going to play a next patch. If not, then there are still other good options. The likes of Diana, still a really good mid lane pick ever since she received the nerfs towards jungle and then buffs towards mid. She has been performing really well here. She has some of the best laning phase within the game. Her Q is a very oppressive ability, pretty hard to miss, pretty easy to hit, hard to miss kind of ability, and has good base damage, especially if you pair it with the likes of Scorch, and if you're running like Electrocute, her burst is really high within the mid lane. She just her biggest problem when playing mid lane Diana is her scaling. She doesn't scale particularly well as a champion. Cassiopeia, great into short range, low mobility compositions. She also will benefit from Roa changes, so is another champion kind of akin to Anivia worth watching. Galio, a great counter pick option. Not blindable. There are too many good picks into him now, especially with some of the baseline durability he has lost. But as a counter pick, he is still one of the best anti-magic options within the game, especially when you opt into things like Hollow Radiance. And you can still play burst build Galios if you're looking for a bit more agency. Yasuo sits within the S tier at the moment. This is obviously going to be a bit of a surprise because Yasuo is a very hard to pilot champion. But Yasuo, if you master him, is probably the best mid laner in the game at the moment. He's performing incredibly well. The changes he received not too long ago with the passive really benefited him quite massively, and if you can master him, he's an incredibly good AD option and probably the pick I would recommend going to at the moment. That being said, though, there is one other AD champion, which I will mention in a second. Was I wrapped up yesterday? Syndra, still an incredibly good pick. For Blackfire Torch Cosmic build, just gives her so much power. Like, the access to that much haste just allows her to consistently EQ, look for picks, and fish for damage within the fight. Her ult has, an amazing amount of uptime. If you can, you could drop ult within a fight and then possibly even rotate it again within a fight if the fight goes on extended long enough. Obviously, that can be unrealistic, pre-16. But still, you can have your ult in most situations whenever you need it. In the case of Ahri, the pickup of the Roa into Liandry build with Riftmaker, I believe, has really benefited this champion. And honestly, she probably should be bumped up to the S+ tier alongside Neferi, who I will talk about in a second. But yeah, Ahri, incredible mobility, has enough base damage within her kit at the moment to enable her to go this more durable build. That is one of the strengths of the champion at the moment, and definitely the AP champion I would recommend this patch. In the case of Neferi, she is being nerfed next patch, but is performing incredibly well at the moment, even after the hotfix nerfs. Her W is an incredibly oppressive ability for certain champions to deal with. The damage she has, combined with some of the build variations, just enable her to have so much power. And I believe the Bruiser build is kind of, I don't want to say sleeper OP. It just looks OP at the moment, and could definitely be something you opt into with Whisper of Shojin, the Cleaver, if you do need it. Obviously, the Assassin build still performs really well, and it's definitely something you could opt into if you need it. My 2 picks of the patch are Ari and Neferi. If you're looking for other AP options, I believe Signal is still really good. Something easier is Malzahar. Galli's a great counter pick. Yasuo is probably number 1 if you are like really, really good at playing the champion. Obviously, if you have low mastery, then I believe Neferi is probably the champion you'd want to opt into with just how strong she is this patch. These are my boys. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.